remove the shield, use a trim tool or a clip tool. Take these push pins out back here. And then there's screws holding the rest of it in. Use an 8mm socket. Take these screws out. Don't worry about that beeping noise. Don't worry about it. Oh, that one's a 7. And one more. And slide this down and out of the way. Now we're going to drain the coolant. The radiator's right here. Just use a Phillips head screwdriver. Make sure you have a drain bucket underneath here. And we'll just pull this out. Make sure the vehicle is not hot when you're doing this. And the radiator cap's right here. I'm going to take that off. Again, make sure the vehicle's not hot when you're doing this. And now the coolant's draining into the bucket. There we go. Remove this cover. You can take these screws out. Use a T30 socket. And grab the cover, slide it up out of the way. I'm going to remove these 2 screws and the 2 on the top as well. Use the T30 socket. This is loose up here, and then we can pop this off over near the airbox. It is clipped in right there, and on the back side, just squeeze it a little bit, slide it up. If you need to, you can pry underneath, but it comes off pretty easy. Now disconnect this connector right here, just push down on the tab, and wiggle it out, just like that. And then it's clipped in, just slide that clip off. You can take a pick and just take that clip off. Just slide that out of the way. And disconnect this connector over here. There's 2 tabs. Just push in on those tabs. Slide the connector off and out of the way. There's a push pin right here. Just use a clip tool or a trim tool. Just get that off. I'm going to take the center out first. And it slides out. Now I'm going to use a T25 socket, take this screw out. I'm going to grab the fan assembly, slide it up. Let's just see what am I caught on. And it slides right out. I'm going to take this coolant hose off the radiator. Just use a pick and get underneath the little clip. Just slide it up. Just like that. That's where it kind of stays when it's locked out of the lock position. And you can just try to pry this off a little bit. Might have to wiggle it. And just slide that off. You might want a drain bucket underneath. You're going to lose some coolant. And now I'm going to take the hose off the thermostat side. We'll do the same. Use the clip. Take that clip up with the pick. And then just wiggle it. And try to pull it off. Might take a little bit of effort. All right, take that off. You're probably gonna have a little more coolant drain out as well. Now there's a hose right next to that hose that we just took off. We're gonna take that off the same way, just use a pick, pull that clip out. All right, that clip is It's basically like a service mode. So once that clip is all the way out, then you can pull the hose off. Again, just wiggle it. That one's a little easier. Slide that out of the way. I'm going to remove the wheel and the inner fender well. You don't necessarily have to do this. It's just easier to access some of the water pump and thermostat area. Use a 17mm socket, take off the lug bolts. When you get to the last one, hold the wheel on, take the bolt off, and take the wheel off. I'm going to remove some of the bolts. Use a 8mm socket. There's one here, one up there. There's a couple over here. We just need it to be able to come out of the way. We have to remove some from underneath. And underneath, there's a couple you want to take off there. Same 8mm socket. And you can pull this out of the way. We don't have to remove it completely, otherwise there's some plastic rivets up top. We don't really want to deal with those. All right, that's good. You can use a bungee cord if you want, just to hold it out of the way. Then we want to take this panel off. There's a 10mm bolt right there. Take that off with a 10mm socket. Then straight up here, there is a nut that we have to take off. Behind here, use a 10mm socket. And right there. That comes right off. Right up here, you want to take this hose clamp and loosen that up. You can use a 6mm socket. Loosen that up. It's a little tricky to get to. Then grab the hose. Just try to get that off. You can move the clamp up. You can pry it off with a pry bar a little bit. Just wiggle it back and forth. And you're going to have some coolant come out as well. Now we're going to take this back hose off, use a 6mm socket, just loosen up that worm clamp right there. Now I'm going to pull that hose off. Just wiggle that. Again, you're going to need the drain bucket. Let that drain. There's a connector on the thermostat housing. Just take a pick. Just get underneath here. Just try not to break the plastic. And disconnect that connector. Set that aside. There's 2 bolts right here. One there, one there. You're going to use a 10mm socket. Take those out. Using a 10mm socket, I'll take those out. Helps to use a swivel socket. A little bit of coolant dropping. You can grab the thermostat housing, slide it out. You can grab it from up top as well if you want to. Some of that out. Or just slide it out right here. We're going to use an E12 socket, like a star socket, and take the bolts out. There's a bolt right next to the AC condenser, right on top of the water pump. Take that one off. Underneath, there's 2 more. Use the same socket. that bolt out. And grab the water pump. You can pull it out a little bit. On the back side of the water pump, there's a couple more hoses. We want to take those off. Just take the hose clamps off the same way. Use a 6mm socket. Loosen those up. I'm just trying to get that hose off. Just twist it back and forth. There we go. Pulled it off. Slide that out. And then we'll take the other one off as well. Loosen that clamp. And just try to pry this off the best you can. Sometimes using a pick or a pry bar, you'll be able to do that. Yeah, it's pretty much off, almost. At this point, it's a little easier to get to the connector. Just pop that off and slide it. Just want to pry right there, or push it with your finger if you can. Now everything's loose on the water pump. Now from up top, you can grab the pump and carefully slide it out. Now take the new pump and carefully slide it down in position without connecting the connector. And if you can line it up on that hose underneath, you're kind of doing this blindly. Try to get that in place, or get it as close as possible. Then we'll go underneath again. Now slide this in that hose. You can slide the worm clamp over where the hose goes. Looks good right there. If you want to get the bolts started in the pump, you could do that now. Get the top bolt in. And get the lower ones in. And just snug those down. All right, snug it up. That's good. And plug this connector in, lock it down. That's good. Now I'm going to tighten that worm clamp down. Make sure that hose is on there good. That looks good. Now I'll take this hose that goes to the thermostat in the water pump. Get this lined up. Get that positioned correctly. And we can tighten that one down. And make sure you tighten that hose clamp. Just grab the hose, make sure it's tight and it's directed in the correct location, just like this. That looks good. Take the thermostat housing. If you want to, you can go in from up top or just try to slide it in here. I'm going to get it lined up with those hoses, the hose down below. And the hose up top as well. All right, got the bottom one on and the top one. Before I clamp those down, I just want to make sure I'm in the right location. Now tighten those two hose clamps down so they're snug. Make sure the hoses are tight. Those look good. Then underneath here, you want to get those two 10mm bolts started. Once they're both started, snug those down. That's good. And take the connector, line it up. And lock it down. Should be good right there. Now you want to take this hose and line this up. It's going to go on the throttle thermostat housing. Line that up. Make sure it locks in. That's good. Now we can line this hose up. I'll get it started on the housing first, on the thermostat housing, and line it up right here. Now I'll line the fan up and slide it down. Now I'll put this screw in, get that lined up, and tighten it down. Just snug it down. And take the push pin, line that up, lock it down. You can take this connector, it's going to connect to that box right there. Now line this connector up and lock it down. Now slide this panel in place, the intake. Line it up over near the air box. This is lined up. And take these screws, get these started, and tighten them down. Should be 2 more. Now put this panel in place, get the screws started. And there should be 1 more down there, and tighten them down. Put this drain plug back in. Get it lined up and just snug it up, not too tight at all. It is just plastic. That should be good. Now we can take this panel, line it up. Repositioned, and get these bolts started. Snug those down. Line this cover up. And get the bolts started. Line these push pins up and push those in. And line this up. these screws in. Put the wheel on. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 110 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Now I'm just going around, double checking. After you're done, you want to add the appropriate coolant, fill it up, and you're going to run the engine for about 10 minutes, monitoring the engine and making sure the level is at the appropriate level. You can shut the vehicle off, let it cool, and then adjust accordingly, and then put the cap back on.